Good morning, anybody who may be listening. Another beautiful day here in Albion. Surprisingly to me, this morning somebody had written, I noticed, if I could speak about the Birmingham bin men strike. And I'm very glad to do it because it's something that's been on my mind for quite a while. And I think it connects to some interesting um, precepts, biblical precepts also. So the situation is that the bin men stopped collecting rubbish about 3 months ago, but a sporadic service for household waste has been kept in place. So sometimes, periodically, they've come to my road fairly often just to collect the waste, but the recycling isn't collected. While in other roads, they haven't been seen, I was reading this morning, for a month and a half, even to collect household rubbish. It's very sporadic. It depends, I suppose, whereabouts in Birmingham you live. And great piles of black bags full of household waste are accumulating once again at the end. Not this particular road, but it leads into a second road. This is just a cul-de-sac at the end of the other road, and you can't get past on the pavement any longer because the people just continue to add to the pile. Um, and it was removed about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it had already grown to impressive proportions, but now it's happening again because people don't know what to do with their rubbish. And you can, if you have a car, take it to the council tip. It's a bit of a rigmarole. You have to book a slot, but that's something that people have been doing, and perhaps some generous people have been offering to take other people's rubbish. Um, if they have elderly neighbours, perhaps these sorts of actions, I'm sure, have been going on, and they're all very good. But the overwhelming uh, climate that I've perceived has been of support for the striking council workers. They were to suffer a financial reduction, they claim, of £8,000 per annum. I don't know whether that's entirely true, but they are rather well paid, or they're certainly paid. Um, the figures that I've read vary from £45,000 a year to as low, I think, as 17,000. But I think generally it's in excess of 30,000, 30 to 40,000, which is, it's not skilled work really, except for the driver who has to be trained. But the men who have to throw it into the, well, they don't even throw it, they just hook the bin onto the lift at the back of the compactor, onto the hopper. I've translated in the field of waste compactors. Quite interesting. I mean, it's not very skilled. It might be quite heavy work, I suppose you could say, but I don't think it's beyond the abilities of many men at all. It does one good to engage in some heavy-duty lifting. People pay good money to go to the gym to do it. Men pay good money to go to the gym to do it. Women too these days. So between the council and the striking bin men, there is, of course, a trade union. And when the trade union assumes a level of control over the narrative, then no solution will ever be found because they're just feeding grist to their own mill. They are wicked, ungodly organizations, and we've been convinced of the need for them by deceptive narratives. In this country, you could go back to the miners' strike of 1983, I think, which was a protracted struggle between the government under Margaret Thatcher and miners who were striking because their pits were being closed unjustly, and they were being closed unjustly. There's no question of it. The government was, had changed its tack and was just closing down whole villages, really, by removing the only available work. I wouldn't defend the government, but really, we're men, you see. The whole idea of banding together and all that. If you were to go back to the biblical parable of the grape gatherers, the grape harvest, if there had been a union, they would have been out in force, wouldn't they? That a man who'd only been working for an hour was to receive the same wages as a man who'd been there since the very early morning. And so that teaches us something. We're not to make those kinds of judgments. Any man can work as much or as little as he sees fit, providing he can find the conditions. All this confederation is not really befitting. If you're not prepared to work for the money that you've been offered, then leave. Righteous indignation has no place. The country, the wickedness in government and in the councils is absolutely beyond the pale. That's the country in which we live. But some people would protest even because the lord of the manor has more money than they do. This is how socialism started to spread. And they don't. It irks them, and so they refuse. They lay down tools. So I'm very critical of the bin workers. Although I've met a few of them when they used to come down, and they were a friendly bunch. I wonder whether a lot of bin workers really would prefer to get back to work, and are prevented from doing so by the way that a trade union can somehow capture the narrative, and so anybody who works can be slurred and called a scab and ostracized. This is how they do it, and it's horrible. There were scenes shown of what do they call them, pickets, trying to stop the bin lorries from leaving the depot, and the police were out there, and it was all a big theatre going on. Now today it seems that they have preferred the tactic to take the lorries out, but just to drive around the town, wasting fuel and not picking up anybody's rubbish. I mean, it's just brutal. They are attempting to hold the city to ransom because they want their privileged high wages. That's not, and they're prepared to harm their neighbours because we all live here, and to defile the area just for the sake of a bowl of pottage, ultimately. Are wages too low in different sectors? I'm sure you could say that, but it's the economic situation in which we live, and we are being driven down low, many of us. I mean, my money has just evaporated. I can't go on strike. I have no union. Somebody tried to form one once. I remember I worked for a big agency. There was a call, more than for a union, a call for collective action because it was seen that the boss was unjust in something or other. And I chatted to the people involved in it for a while, and it just seemed to me that several of the keenest people to put this in place were some of the most rubbish translators that I've ever met, and indolent to boot. And I simply wasn't prepared to throw in my lot with them, because I've always worked hard and as well as I can. I'm sure everybody does, but There were people who, I think, who took it a bit more lightly, and I would have nothing to do with it at all. Each man should make an agreement with his employer and then keep to it. And if he no longer feels that he can, then he should leave and cede his place to somebody who needs a job. There are plenty of men around who could do with some work, especially those who are just being given benefits for no reason. It's a reprehensible situation, really. When it will end, I don't know. Perhaps it never will end. Perhaps this is the beginning of the end, you could say. As Birmingham is a very important centre in Great Britain because it is at the centre. It is in the Midlands, and it's the centre of our industrial nation, or it was. And it was a somewhat Christian city, even in the 1800s, or in the 1700s, 1800s in particular. And it drew the interest of many philanthropists due to some extent to the maudlin ramblings of Charles Dickens. The descriptions of the early industries were seen to be akin to hell. Again, it's just the wickedness of the writers. And so philanthropists came and transformed Birmingham into a very green city. So there are many country areas and parks and many trees. It's a very pleasant city if it were just clean and orderly, but it has been cast down by our rulers and their wickedness. And this is another, I don't want to say nail in the coffin, because I do think that there's going to be a resurgence, of course. I'm a Bible believer. It just comes with the territory. How long, Lord, how long, is a question I suppose I could ask, but it's in the Lord's hand, this stuff. And I was reading the Deuteronomical curses this morning. I think it's in chapter 23 or thereabouts. Now, some people have claimed that we are under the Deuteronomical curses, but I wouldn't have thought so at the moment. And they are absolutely terrifying. And of course, they're brought upon the people due to disobedience, which is very widespread today. Very widespread. Abortion clinics continuing to do their trade, unjust authority in the church, the acceptance of those who burn incense to another god in our midst as though it were nothing. All these things are ongoing. So you could say that the accumulation of waste in my city is part of the punishment that is meted out upon us. The council isn't fit for purpose. No council is. They just become, with a few exceptions, I'm sure that there are good men and women within those organizations, but they function really to funnel money away from the people and to live really rather a lavish lifestyle for those who are able to secure a position. They can't manage, this English expression, they couldn't manage a piss up in a brewery. They're just committees of ineffectual committees. Now, when the miners were striking, the army was brought in to break the strike. Unjustly, I would say, really to break that strike. They shouldn't have closed the mines. But, so it was. But I'd be in favour of the army being brought in to remove the rubbish from the streets of Birmingham. You see, the army theoretically is under the governance of the king, so it is theoretically a godly institution. But sadly, the King of England is not has shown himself not to be a devoted man or a lover of the Holy Bible. Any mention of Christianity, I think he would sooner walk in the excrement of a dog than be forced to celebrate the King of Kings. So this is another part of the curse that is placed upon our people at the moment. But it will change for sure. It must change. Where am I going to put the rubbish? God bless.